I am sitting very comfortably in my apartment. It is a cold, late autumn evening in Boston, and snow is drifting past the street lamp outside my window. I'm sitting on the couch with my dog doing homework for graduate school, and the book that I am reading is about theology in the early Middle Ages, and it is working wonders that a sleeping pill might not even be able to accomplish, and I am starting to nod off. Just then, I hear someone shout. What's wrong, I wonder? I go to the window and I look outside. As I do, I hear more and more screaming. Is someone hurt, I think? Has there been an accident? Is there a murderer on the loose? My mind goes to the worst. But as my eyes adjust to the soft glow outside, I can see people streaming outside of their houses and apartments. They are hugging each other, cheering and laughing. The Red Sox have won the World Series, and it seems that all of Boston is lit up with joy. And it would be this way for the next several days at least. I'm just relieved that there is not a murderer on the loose. Now, I was vaguely aware that the Red Sox were playing in the World Series, more than vaguely. In Boston, there is a kind of ardent enthusiasm for baseball, and it is hard to remain oblivious to it. This is a city of hardcore fans. And so standing in my apartment, watching the enthusiastic responses, I remember back a few weeks earlier, a man wearing a New York Yankees hat was walking in front of me as I was trekking to class. That was when someone pulled over in their car, rolled the window down, and shouted, "Screw you, buddy." They don't like the New York Yankees in Boston. Like I said, Boston takes its baseball quite seriously. So 2 weeks ago, I preached about passion. And in that sermon, I mentioned sports as an example. Later that day, I received an email claiming that I had given sports a short shrift. I had too quickly dismissed it as an example of when passion can turn destructive, such as in the case of rioting after a game. But this member, who asked to remain anonymous but gave me permission to share their thoughts, said that sports are about more than that. Sports are also about belonging and democracy and social cohesion. In the email, that person said, "We are a society of fans." We're a society of fans. I love this idea. I find it provocative and interesting. What does it mean to be a society of fans? This question has led me on something of a journey into the world of fans and the things that they love. And as it turns out, lots of people have written about this world of fans. Fans have their own history and varieties and permutations. I confess that before this journey, I did not even know the origin of the word fan. Does anybody here know it? It comes from fanatic. It's a shortened version of the word fanatic. So a fan is a fanatic follower of a particular person or thing or social phenomenon. Now, I am not like my friend Lisa, who waited for hours outside of Smashing Pumpkins lead singer Billy Corgan's house hoping for an autograph. Nor am I the poor soul who remortgaged his house so that he could buy Kurt Cobain's sweater. In my 20s, I did, however, experience the ecstasy of a 3-hour Madonna concert and regretted that it couldn't have gone on longer. I also once tripped when I thought I saw Madonna it turned out to be a professional look-alike drag queen. So I guess I am a fan. And maybe I'm a little more passionate than I thought, too. In any case, I am fascinated by this etymological linkage of fans with fanatics. A fanatic, of course, is a term derived from religious vocabulary, and it has been used since the 16th century as a derogatory term for religious minorities. The Oxford English Dictionary defines it as a person characterized, influenced, or prompted by excessive and mistaken enthusiasm, especially in religious matters. Fanatic, in turn, derives from the Latin word fanaticus, which was a pagan temple attendant in the ancient world. As Victoria Nelson, who is one of the scholars of fans, puts it, for almost 2,000 years then, fanatic has been a word that Western mainstream religious orthodoxy applies pejoratively to members of marginal and potentially threatening religious groups. Now, fanatics are still alive and well, as we saw last week with the Paris terrorist attacks. But as a social phenomenon, fans are quite distinct from fanatics. The consequences of their passion are not so life and death, we might put it, and the enthusiasm of fans is not so much feared in our society as it is dismissed as trivial. This transition happened in the late 19th century when the word fan first came into popular usage. Divorced of its strictly religious association, the fan was first used to describe sports devotees. A few decades later, as popular mass entertainment entered everyday homes, the word spread to describe any ardent enthusiast. By the 1920s, fan magazines, specifically about science fiction, fantasy, and horror, began to spring up. This was one of the first places that fans began to correspond with one another. You might say that it was the first time that an explicit community developed rather than just a mass of people who were cheering at a game or perhaps enjoying a genre independently. The 1930s is when communities of fans were first developed. Now, one of the defining characteristics of fans is that they do not necessarily participate in the reality that they so passionately endorse. Howard Hendricks put it this way: at a football game, there are 70,000 people desperately in need of exercise, watching 22 people desperately in need of rest. I think that the same could be said for fans of science fiction and fantasy. For example, with The Lord of the Rings, you have millions of people desperately in need of excitement and novelty reading about two people desperately in need of a little boredom and routine. Poor Frodo and Bilbo. There is a vicarious quality that is necessary to being a fan. It is participation once removed. And this peculiar quality is something that social scientists have begun to study. This week I picked up Eric Simon's book, The Secret Life of Sports Fans, The Science of Sports Obsession. In it, he outlines theories of what happens to enthusiasts when they watch a game. It turns out that researchers in the fields of evolutionary psychology, neurology, and psychology have detailed this extensively. These researchers took hormone samples from onlookers at various points during the game. And these were not just any onlookers. These were the face-painted, costume-wearing, never-miss-a-game fans. And from studying these samples, the theorists came up with different ideas for what is going on for sports fans. Some of them said that sports fans are hooked in by the challenge of the game. A team that they identify with is being challenged by outsiders. It is like someone saying to you, "You're not good enough," and you responding back, "Oh, yes, I am, and I'm going to prove it." But other thinkers believe that sports fandom is a remnant of evolutionary tribalism and social dominance. In other words, it's not about the challenge, but instead it is about the win. We associate with a particular group, and we are exhilarated when they emerge victorious, and we are depressed when they are defeated. The debate between these two groups has settled around when testosterone peaks in viewers. And interestingly, this is true for both male and female viewers. For example, the researchers that claim that being a sports fan is about excitement, the excitement of being challenged, argue that testosterone will peak at the beginning of the game when they are anticipating the conflict, and also during the parts of the game that are particularly stressful. In contrast, the researchers that claim that being a sports fan is about social dominance argue that testosterone will peak when viewers anticipate and experience a win. So which is it? Well, it depends on which study you use. Turns out each camp has its own study that supports its particular theory. And many theorists will now say that because of the unreliability of those studies, the results are too inconclusive to propose any cohesive theory of sports fans. I like what Eric Simon says about this, writing, "The hormonal response for human beings is not unadulterated reflex. What we humans do is adulterate our reflexes." So much for explaining fans with simple biology. Science, through the use of this kind of hormone research, tends to understand fans in terms of conflict, aggression, and dominance. But this is quite different from how many fans describe their own experience. As the person who wrote me an email put it, being a fan is also about democracy and social cohesion as much as it is about anything else. H.P. Lovecraft, one of the fathers of modern dark fantasy and an originator of science fiction fan clubs, wrote this about his co-enthusiasts in the 1930s. "There are no limits of age, sex, education, position, or locality in this most complete of democracies." And this is where I think some of the value of being a fan begins to emerge. Being a fan is a way to construct an imaginative community among parts of society that would not typically mix. What distinguishes a community of fans from many other forms of community is the intensity of engagement. Victoria Nelson calls it secondary belief. And this is a kicked-up version of the suspension of disbelief, which is what allows one to read literature without getting worried over its improbable details. Secondary belief is an acceptance of the experience of the fantasy world as real. You can think about it from the sports examples that we just used. The participants are actually feeling along with the players. They are experiencing the game rather than simply viewing it. Now, it is the same with ardent science fiction fans. They experience in their bodies the world that they are reading about or watching. This is what separates fans from casual viewers. It is the element of total absorption. And for the moments people are engaged in those worlds, their co-fans are their companions. It is the wealthy mother of four who was a young woman in the 1980s sitting next to the 25-year-old gay theology student, both singing along with Madonna's Like a Prayer. Or it is the 18-year-old Middle Eastern high school student and the middle-aged Caucasian father of teenagers playing an online version of Dungeons and Dragons halfway across the world from each other. Or it is the mass of baseball fans pouring out of their houses on a cold Boston night to celebrate together. Here, distinctions of age and sex and work and ethnicity drop away, and for a brief time, a tenuous social cohesion emerges. Now, I know that this is romantic and somewhat unrealistic. When H.P. Lovecraft died, his fans splintered into factions. There were those who dressed like him, ate like him, rode the bus like he did, and started to make pilgrimages to his grave in Providence, Rhode Island. And then there were those who started to actually believe in his world of dark gods and monsters, to think that they were real, and to begin to build an actual religion around it. And then there were those who just liked his books. These factions began holding competing conventions, and many would not speak to each other. And there are also other problems with the passion of fans, ones that I talked about 2 weeks ago. Passion for something can turn destructive, such as when sports fans riot over an umpire's call. All of this is to say that fans are human, and sometimes they disagree or behave badly. But through my journey into what it means to be a fan, I have come to appreciate the communities that they construct. And here's why. Our world is being ripped open by the terror of religious and political fanatics. And in that context, I think that we need more communities that offer a belonging that is not premised on violence. The world of fans, with all of its campiness and triviality, can look like a refreshing democratic alternative to that. It's in that sense that the experience of being a fan might be a worthy one. Perhaps the historical dismissal of the fan, that stepchild of the fanatic, that marginal community with its common and seemingly trivial enthusiasm, can give way to an appreciation for the imaginative democracy that it is creating. At least, I hope so. My spiritual companions, I love you. Blessings on your journey, and amen.